Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. You are currently standing at the threshold of the most vital information stream in the human experience. In the science of human relationships, words are nothing more than neural static. They are the low-resolution tools that people use to conceal their true intentions, to build social masks, and to project an identity that does not exist in biological reality. The bungler spends their entire life listening to words, reacting to sentences, and wondering why they are constantly blindsided by the actions of those around them. They are operating on a broken frequency. The sovereign master, however, recognizes that the body cannot lie. Your biological hardware was coded millions of years before your ancestors developed the ability to speak. Long before we had nouns and verbs, we had the tilt of a head, the dilation of a pupil, and the rigid tension of a shoulder. These are the source signals of the grid. To command the 1% margin, you must learn to bypass the verbal interface and audit the raw physical data. You are about to master the power of body language, not as a hobby, but as a clinical instrument of social dominance and internal sovereignty. Every human node in your network is a broadcasting station. They are constantly leaking data about their level of comfort, their hidden aggressions, their insecurities, and their true feelings toward you. Most people are blind nodes. They are so consumed by their own internal static, their ego, their anxiety, their need to be liked, that they fail to see the flashing warning lights right in front of them. The sovereign master practices total situational calibration. You enter every interaction as a clinical observer, a scientist in the laboratory of human specimens. You do not look at people, you audit their baselines. To understand when someone is lying or when they are concealing a black swan, you must first understand how they move when they are at peace. This is the foundation of the 1% margin. You observe the rhythm of their breathing, the habitual placement of their hands, and the natural posture of their spine. Once you have the baseline, any deviation becomes a high-resolution signal. A sudden shift in weight, a momentary micro-expression of contempt, or the shielding of the neck. These are the coordinates that reveal the truth behind the mask. Consider the law of limbic dominance. Your brain is divided into layers, and the most ancient parts, the limbic system, are responsible for your survival. When a node feels threatened, uncomfortable, or defensive, the limbic system takes over. It triggers the freeze, flight, or fight response. These reactions are involuntary. A person can rehearse a speech for 1,000 hours, but they cannot stop their pupils from constricting when they feel a flash of dislike. They cannot stop the ventral shielding, the instinctive move to cover the vital organs when they feel exposed. As a sovereign, you are looking for these limbic leaks. When you see a target cross their arms or place an object between you and them, you are not seeing a random movement. You are seeing a neural blockade. They are signaling that the frequency of the interaction has become hostile or uncomfortable. Instead of reacting with static, you use this data to recalibrate your approach. You use tactical empathy to lower their defenses, watching their body language for the exact second a blockade drops. This is how you navigate the grid with surgical precision.
Furthermore, we must analyze the architecture of authority. In the Audiobook Empire, we do not ask for respect. We broadcast a frequency that commands it. Space is the ultimate currency of dominance. The bungler tries to make themselves small. They hunch their shoulders, they fidget with their hands, and they avoid eye contact to signal that they are not a threat. They are broadcasting a submissive frequency. The sovereign master occupies space with clinical confidence. You understand that stillness is the ultimate sign of power. A node that is constantly moving is a node that is anxious and seeking validation. A node that can remain perfectly still with an open posture and steady eye contact signals that they are the lead node of the network. They are not threatened by the environment because they own the environment. This is the 1% margin of physical presence. By controlling your own biological signals, you force the other nodes in the room to calibrate to your tempo. You become the anchor point of the interaction. Let us audit the eye contact grid. The eyes are the highest bandwidth sensors in the human body. Most people use eye contact as a tool of social submission or aggression, but the sovereign uses it as a data scanner. You do not stare like a predator, nor do you look away like a servant. You maintain the sovereign gaze, a calm, focused, and clinical observation that signals you are processing everything. You look for the flash of recognition, the blink rate of a person under pressure, and the direction of their gaze when they are accessing memory versus when they are constructing a lie. When a person's blink rate increases, their neural processing load is high. They are struggling to maintain the mask. This is where you find the black swans. This is where the truth is hidden in the silence. By holding your gaze a second longer than the social norm, you test the target's sovereign shielding. If they look down, they have yielded the coordinate. If they look away, they are seeking an escape. If they hold the gaze, you have found a node of high resolution. In your global network, you must also master the science of proxemics, the study of personal space. Every human node has a series of orbital shells around them. There is the public space, the social space, the personal space, and the intimate space. The bungler violates these spaces accidentally, creating grid friction and making people instinctively defensive. The sovereign uses space as a tactical lever. You know exactly when to move into a person's personal shell to create a neural spike of pressure, and when to lean back to give them the illusion of control. By manipulating the distance between you and the target, you are directly affecting their brain chemistry. You are triggering the release of cortisol or oxytocin without saying a single word. This is the ultimate stealth protocol. You are hacking the target's biological OS through the simple geometry of the room. We must also audit the hands of truth. The human brain gives more neural real estate to the hands than to almost any other part of the body. In our evolutionary past, if we couldn't see a node's hands, we assumed they were holding a weapon. That instinct remains. When you hide your hands, in your pockets, under a table, or behind your back, you are broadcasting a red frequency of untrustworthiness. The sovereign always keeps their hands visible. You use steepling, touching the fingertips together, to signal high confidence and intellectual dominance. You avoid self-soothing behaviors, such as touching your neck or adjusting your watch, because these are neural signal flares that announce your anxiety to the world. A sovereign's hands are calm, purposeful, and open. They signal that you have nothing to hide and everything to gain. As we continue our clinical audit of the human broadcast system, we move from the extremities to the most deceptive yet revealing coordinate, the face. The bungler spends their entire life looking at the mouth, believing that a smile is a universal signal of warmth. But the sovereign master recognizes the smile of the serpent, a strategic mask designed to manipulate the grid. We look for the Duchenne marker, the involuntary contraction of the orbicularis oculi muscles around the eyes. A counterfeit smile is a bottom-up gesture. It only involves the zygomatic major muscles of the mouth. It is a social performance. A genuine smile is a top-down biological event. If the eyes do not smile with the mouth, the frequency is toxic. You recognize this counterfeit resonance, and you know that the node is performing a script. You do not trust the mask, you trust the ocular grid. By mastering the audit of the eyes, you see the truth long before the target has finished their verbal performance. Let us now analyze the architecture of personal space and the limbic buffer zones. Every human node operates within a sovereign shell, a series of concentric circles that define their comfort and security. The intimate zone is the highest bandwidth coordinate reserved for trusted nodes. When you invade this zone without a biological green light, you trigger a neural spike of fear and hostility in the target. The social zone is where the majority of the grid's transactions occur. The sovereign master knows how to expand and contract their presence to manipulate these zones.
By stepping slightly into the target's intimate space and then withdrawing, you create a neural vacuum that forces the target to focus exclusively on your frequency. You are the architect of the proximity, using the physics of distance to establish your hierarchy in the room. You do not wait to be invited. You occupy the coordinates that serve your mission. We must also audit the science of the shoulder shrug in the context of signal integrity. A node who is truly uncertain will perform a full system shrug. Both shoulders rise, the palms turn up, and the eyebrows lift. This is neural alignment. However, if a node provides a verbal answer and only one shoulder rises, the signal is fractured. They are withholding a black swan. Their body is literally shrinking away from the lie they are telling. The sovereign master identifies these asymmetrical leaks with clinical focus. You do not accept the verbal answer. You stay on the coordinate until the target's biology and words are synchronized. You are the auditor who refuses to operate on muffled frequencies. This is how the Audiobook Empire maintains its absolute clarity in a world of social noise. Finally, we deconstruct the protocol of the arm cross. While the bungler views crossed arms as a simple sign of cold or comfort, the sovereign master recognizes it as ventral shielding. The node is protecting their heart, lungs, and stomach from a threatening broadcast. They have closed the coordinate. If you continue to deliver your frequency while the target is in a shielded state, your words will not penetrate their neural guardrails.
You must first unlock the grid. You give the target something to hold, a document, a pen, or a cup, forcing them to uncross their arms and expose their ventral space. Once the shield is dropped, the neural bridge is re-established. You are the operator who dismantles the target's defenses through the simple manipulation of physical objects. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now audit the physical handshake, the primary neural handshake of the grid and the most direct measurement of a node's internal hierarchy. The bungler views the handshake as a social formality. The sovereign master views it as a diagnostic tool for territorial dominance. When you engage a node, you must instantly calibrate their palm orientation. A node who offers their hand with the palm facing slightly upward is broadcasting a submissive frequency. They are yielding the coordinate and signaling a desire to please. Conversely, the palm-down handshake is an aggressive overlay. The node is attempting to physically press down on your sovereign signal, asserting their status as the lead node. The sovereign master maintains the vertical equalizer, a perfectly perpendicular grip that signals high-resolution peer status. If a target attempts a dominance down grip, you do not yield. You utilize the step-in recalibration. By stepping slightly forward and into the target's left orbital space, you force their hand into a vertical position, neutralizing their aggression through the simple physics of the grid. You have reclaimed the coordinate without uttering a single word of protest. Furthermore, we must deconstruct the protocol of the double-hander, often referred to as the glove. In the social mask, this is portrayed as warmth and sincerity. In the clinical audit of the Audiobook Empire, we recognize it as a neural box.
By using the second hand to cover the target's hand, the node is attempting to limit your movement and increase their signal influence. It is a display of counterfeit intimacy. Unless you are the higher status node in the interaction, utilizing the glove is a high-risk maneuver that can be detected as a manipulation attempt. Similarly, the wrist grab and the shoulder touch during a handshake are dominance boosters. They are designed to bypass the target's sovereign shielding and establish a parent-child hierarchy. You must audit these tactile incursions with surgical focus. If a node attempts to box your signal, you respond with clinical stillness, refusing to mirror the intimacy until you have verified the integrity of their frequency. Let us now shift our sensors to the ocular grid and the law of eye contact. In the global network, where you look determines the altitude of the interaction. The bungler utilizes a submissive gaze, frequently looking away to signal they are not a threat. They are yielding the visual bandwidth. The sovereign master utilizes the power gaze. You focus your visual sensors on the third eye, the triangular coordinate between the target's eyes and the center of the forehead. This creates a neural pressure that signals absolute authority. It makes the target feel audited, as if you are looking directly into their source code. To build stealth rapport, you shift to the social gaze, focusing on the triangle between the eyes and the mouth. But when it is time to enforce a directive or demand the truth, you return to the power gaze. You are the operator who controls the target's internal state by manipulating their visual environment. We must also audit the blink rate frequency as an indicator of cognitive load. A human node blinks between 6 and 8 times per minute under normal conditions.
However, when a node is under neural stress or is performing a deception script, the blink rate will spike dramatically. This is a sign of processor overload. The brain is struggling to reconcile the social mask with the biological truth. Conversely, a sudden drop in blink rate, a fixed stare, indicates predatory intent or extreme focus. You recognize these shifts in frequency as the most honest indicators of the target's internal clock. When you see the blink rate spike, you know the target is vulnerable. You do not offer relief. You maintain your sovereign stillness and watch as their internal architecture begins to fracture under the weight of their own static. You are the auditor who waits for the collapse. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the eye block. When the brain encounters information that is repellent or threatening, it instinctively attempts to delete the visual input. This manifests as lid guarding, where the eyelids stay closed for a fraction of a second longer than a normal blink. It is the physical manifestation of, "I don't like what I am seeing." In high-stakes social interactions, observe the target's lids when you introduce a new variable or a specific liability. If the lids linger closed, you have hit a neural nerve. They are trying to shut out your broadcast. The sovereign master recognizes the eye block as a diagnostic tool to map the target's internal no-go zones. You use this data to navigate the grid, bypassing the blockades or dismantling them with clinical efficiency. You see the truth because you know where the target is trying to go blind. The science of pupil dilation requires one final, deeper investigation into biological interest. We have established that the pupils are the most honest part of the ocular grid because they are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. When a node sees something they desire, a lucrative deal, a high-status partner, or a green frequency idea, their pupils will dilate. This is neural expansion. When they encounter a red frequency, their pupils will constrict into pinpoints. The sovereign master monitors these microscopic shifts to determine the target's true internal audit. If the target's mouth says, "I am interested," but their pupils are constricted, the signal is a lie. You prioritize the biological data over the social performance. By mastering this level of ocular telemetry, you are no longer guessing. You are operating on raw biological certainty. The audiobook empire is built on this absolute refusal to be deceived by the social mask. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Let us now advance our clinical audit toward the limbic guardrails of the arms and the primal honesty of the legs. In the science of human relationships, the torso contains the vital organs, the heart, lungs, and stomach, and the brain's primary objective is to protect these coordinates from a perceived threat frequency. The bungler believes that crossed arms are just a comfortable habit. The sovereign master knows that comfort is often a biological euphemism for safety. When a node crosses their arms over their chest, they are performing ventral guarding. They are building a physical barrier to dampen the impact of your broadcast. You recognize this as a red frequency. If you continue to deliver high-pressure data while the target is shielded, your signal will be deflected by their neural armor. You must utilize the surgical unlock. You hand them a document, a tablet, or a physical object. The moment their arms uncross to receive the item, their ventral coordinate is exposed, and their limbic system becomes receptive to your frequency once again.
You do not argue with a shielded node. You dismantle the shield through the physics of interaction. Let us deconstruct the hierarchy of the arm cross. The standard cross is a general broadcast of defensive posturing. However, when the node clutches their upper arms with their hands, the reinforced cross, the internal static is high. They are literally holding themselves together in the face of grid turbulence. But observe the thumb-up cross. This is a hybrid signal. While the arms are crossed in defense, the thumbs are pointing upward. This signals that the node feels superior or high status, despite their defensive stance. They are auditing you from a position of perceived strength. The sovereign master identifies this as arrogant guarding. You do not treat this as a sign of insecurity. You treat it as a challenge to the lead node's status. You maintain your sovereign stillness and focus your power gaze until the thumbs drop and the armor dissolves. Furthermore, we must audit the stealth barrier and the partial arm cross. In high-status environments, nodes often avoid the overt arm cross to maintain a social mask of openness. Instead, they utilize displacement shields. A node might reach across their body to touch their watch, adjust their cuff, or hold a glass with both hands in front of their chest. This is ventral blunting. They are placing a small object or a single limb over their vital coordinates to provide a neural buffer. The sovereign master audits these microscopic shields as signs of social anxiety or strategic withholding. You recognize that the target is not fully aligned with your frequency. You utilize ventral openness and leaning in to test their guard. If the target tightens their partial shield, you have hit a neural nerve. You are now navigating their internal no-go zones. We now descend to the most honest part of the human hardware, the legs and feet. In the global network, the further a body part is from the brain, the less the social mask can control it. The face is a theater of lies, but the feet are the limbic truth. Because the legs were the primary tools of survival, to run toward food or away from predators, they are hardwired to broadcast neural intent with zero delay. Observe the direction of the feet in a standing interaction. If a node is speaking to you, but their feet are pointed toward the exit or toward another node, their limbic GPS has already left the coordinate. You are no longer the primary frequency. The sovereign master does not waste energy on a node whose feet are broadcasting exit intent. You either pivot the interaction to reclaim their attention, or you terminate the broadcast on your own terms. You do not compete with the exit sign. You command the space until the exit is your decision. Let us deconstruct the architecture of the seated leg cross. When a node crosses their legs, they are signaling neural security or territorial locking. The standard European cross is a sign of comfort, but if the arms are also crossed, the total system shutdown is in effect. However, the American figure 4 cross, where the ankle rests on the knee, is a maximalist dominance signal. It creates a large sovereign shell and signals that the node is ready to compete. In a negotiation, this is a hostile frequency. The sovereign master recognizes the figure 4 as a sign of stubborn alignment. If a target adopts this posture, their mind is closed to new data. You do not continue the pitch, you change the geometry. You stand up, move to a new coordinate, or ask them to look at something on the other side of the room. By forcing them to uncross their legs to follow you, you break their neural lock and reset their internal OS. Finally, we audit the standing scissor cross. When a node stands with their legs crossed, they have voluntarily compromised their balance and their flight response. This is a high-resolution green light. It signals that the node feels absolutely secure in your presence. They do not perceive you as a threat. The sovereign master utilizes this knowledge to build biological trust. You do not mirror this posture if you wish to maintain lead node status, as it signals a lack of readiness. Instead, you maintain the wide base anchor, signaling that you are the stable center of the grid. By observing who in the room is scissoring their legs, you can map the circles of trust with surgical accuracy. You see the hidden alliances because you see who has dropped their guard. The Audiobook Empire is built on this absolute refusal to miss the signals of the lower limbs. Stay on the frequency, the grid is yours, the signal is absolute, the sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. We must now advance our clinical audit to the facial grid and the high-frequency hand-to-face signal clusters. In the global network, the face is the most sophisticated social mask ever designed, but the hands act as the neural leaks that expose the friction beneath the surface. When a node is engaged in a deception script or is experiencing cognitive overload, the brain's internal static manifests as micro-movements that the social mask cannot suppress. The bungler misses these signals. The sovereign master monitors them with surgical precision. We begin with the mouth guard. When a node is broadcasting a lie, the brain instinctively sends a command to stop the signal. The hand moves to cover the mouth, often using the thumb to press against the cheek. This is the biological equivalent of an emergency shutdown. Even when the node is listening, if they cover their mouth, it signals that they feel you're withholding a black swan, or that they are suppressing their own disagreement. You recognize this neural blockade, and you do not proceed until the hand drops. You are the auditor who knows that a covered mouth is a closed mind. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the nose touch. This is the physical manifestation of the Pinocchio effect. When a node experiences the neural surge of a lie, the sensitive tissues in the nose become engorged with blood due to a sudden increase in blood pressure. It creates a neural itch that must be scratched. It is not a heavy rub, it is a series of light, transient touches to the nose. The sovereign master differentiates this from a common cold or an allergy by auditing the timing coordinate. If the hand moves to the nose the exact millisecond a hard target question is delivered, you have detected a limbic flare. The target's biology has just confirmed the deception that their words are trying to hide. You do not call out the lie, you simply apply tactical pressure to the topic until the target's sovereign shielding fully disintegrates. We must also audit the science of the eye rub. When a node encounters a reality they find repellent or a truth they wish to delete, the brain triggers a visual blockade. The hand moves to rub the eye or the lids close for a prolonged period. This is the body's attempt to shut out the toxic frequency of the interaction. Men typically rub their eyes vigorously, while women, maintaining their social mask, may use a lighter touch below the eye. Regardless of the intensity, the signal is red. The node is refusing to front the data you are delivering. The sovereign master recognizes this ocular withdrawal and knows that the neural bridge has been severed. You do not continue the broadcast into a closed system. You utilize pattern interrupts to force the target to re-engage with the grid before delivering the final directive. Let us now analyze the protocol of the ear tug and the neck scratch. When a node begins to tug at their earlobe or rub the back of the ear, they are performing a neural reset. They have heard something that makes them feel biologically insecure. They are literally trying to block the sound or soothe the anxiety caused by your frequency. Similarly, the neck scratch, usually 5 strokes with the index finger below the earlobe, is a broadcast of uncertainty and doubt. The node is saying yes with their mouth, but their neck is saying, "I don't believe you." The sovereign master ignores the verbal confirmation and calibrates to the scratch. You recognize that the target is neurally misaligned. You do not close the deal on a neck scratch. You stay on the coordinate until the signal integrity is restored. You are the lead node who demands total neural coherence from every participant in the grid. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of the evaluation cluster versus the decision-making cluster. When a node rests their chin on their hand with the index finger pointing upward along the cheek, they are in a state of high-resolution audit. They are processing your data. However, if the thumb supports the chin while the other fingers cover the mouth, the evaluation has turned negative. They are critical of your broadcast. The sovereign master observes this shift in the hand-to-face geometry and adjusts the frequency in real time. But the most critical signal is the chin stroke. When the hand moves to stroke the chin, the node has entered the decision-making phase. This is the neural threshold. You do not interrupt a node during the chin stroke. You maintain sovereign stillness. If you speak during this phase, you introduce neural static that can disrupt a positive outcome. You wait for the stroke to end and watch for the exit gesture. If the node leans forward after the stroke, the decision is green. If they lean back and cross their arms, the decision is red. You are the navigator who knows exactly when to push and when to vanish into the silence. Finally, let us deconstruct the architecture of boredom. When the hand is used to support the head, the node is signaling that their neural battery is depleted. The weight of the head in the palm is a direct indicator of the level of disinterest. The more the hand supports the head, the further the node has drifted from your frequency. If the head is fully resting in the palm, the limbic shutdown is complete. The sovereign master does not tolerate idle nodes in their grid. You do not continue your broadcast to an empty coordinate. You utilize a sudden frequency shift, a change in volume, a physical movement, or a hard target question to force the node back into lead node calibration. You are the architect of the atmosphere, and you ensure that every node in the audiobook empire remains at a state of high-intensity resonance. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the audiobook empire. We must now direct our clinical audit toward the ocular matrix and the proxemic architecture of human interaction. In the global network, where a node looks and how they occupy space are the most profound indicators of their internal hierarchy and limbic intent. The bungler believes that eye contact is a binary signal. Either you are looking or you are not. The sovereign master recognizes that the ocular grid is divided into precise gaze coordinates, each broadcasting a different frequency of status and intent. We begin with the business gaze. To establish absolute neural dominance in a professional audit, you focus your visual sensors on a triangular area on the target's forehead with the eyes and the third eye as the vertices. This creates an atmosphere of clinical intensity. It signals that you are auditing the target's very source code. When you maintain the business gaze, the target feels a neural pressure that discourages social static and demands high-resolution accuracy. You are the lead node, and your gaze is the tool of extraction. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the social gaze and the intimate gaze. The social gaze drops the frequency to the triangle between the target's eyes and mouth. This is the green frequency used to build stealth rapport and signal ventral receptivity. It is the baseline for most social transactions in the grid. However, the intimate gaze, where the eyes travel below the chin to other parts of the body, is a high-intensity signal of personal attraction or predatory audit. Utilizing the intimate gaze in a professional coordinate is a frequency violation that can trigger the target's sovereign shielding or a limbic alarm. The sovereign master knows exactly how to switch between these gazes with surgical timing. You utilize the social gaze to disarm and then abruptly shift to the business gaze to assert dominance when delivering a sovereign directive. You control the ocular altitude of every interaction. We must also audit the protocol of the sideways glance. This is a hybrid frequency that can broadcast either interest or hostility, depending on the accompanying signals of the brow and mouth. If a node looks at you sideways with slightly raised eyebrows or a smile, they are signaling neural interest or a stealth invitation to connect. However, if the sideways glance is accompanied by a furrowed brow or a downturned mouth, it is a broadcast of suspicion and critical audit. They are sidling your signal because they do not trust your frequency. The sovereign master recognizes the side eye as a grid fracture. You do not ignore it. You ventrally front the target, forcing them to align their torso and eyes with your coordinate. By reclaiming the geometry of the interaction, you neutralize their skepticism and force them back into your neural tempo. Let us now descend into the science of proxemics and the sovereign shell. Every human node operates within series of concentric limbic buffer zones that define their biological security. The intimate zone is the most protected coordinate, extending up to 45 centimeters from the body. Entry into this zone without biological authorization triggers a neural spike of adrenaline and cortisol. The bungler enters this space aggressively, causing the target to perform ventral denial and ocular blocking. The sovereign master understands the physics of distance. You respect the personal zone for standard audits, but you utilize strategic incursion to destabilize a resistant node. By leaning into the target's intimate space for a fraction of a second and then withdrawing, you create a neural vacuum that forces the target to focus exclusively on your broadcast. You are the architect of the proximity, and you use the limbic buffer to steer the target's internal state toward compliance. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of territoriality and seating geometry. In the science of human relationships, the chair you choose and the way you sit are direct broadcasts of your territorial ownership. Observe the corner position at a rectangular table. This is the stealth coordinate, allowing for maximum ventral openness and minimal neural friction. It is the ideal position for building rapport and frequency alignment. However, the competitive defensive position, sitting directly across from another node, creates a direct signal clash. The table becomes a physical barricade. In this geometry, conversations are shorter and more aggressive. The sovereign master avoids the competitive position unless the mission is one of direct confrontation. To maintain the lead node status in a negotiation, you utilize the cooperative position, sitting on the same side as the target. This signals that your frequencies are phase-locked and that you are auditing the problem, not each other. You manipulate the physical grid to ensure your broadcast is received without limbic resistance. Let us analyze the protocol of the chair ownership. A node who sits straddling the chair, using the back of the chair as a shield, is broadcasting aggressive insecurity. They are attempting to box their own vulnerability while projecting a counterfeit dominance. The sovereign master recognizes this as limbic compensation. You do not compete with their shield. You move to a standing wide base anchor, looking down at the straddling node to re-establish the vertical hierarchy. By changing the altitude of the broadcast, you make their chair shield look redundant and weak. Similarly, observe the leaning back with hands behind head posture. This is high-status hooding.
It signals absolute territorial security and intellectual arrogance. When a target hoods in your presence, they are signaling that they own the coordinate. You disrupt this dominance loop by handing them an object that forces them to reach forward and break the posture. You are the operator who refuses to let any node remain in a state of sovereign expansion unless it serves your mission.
Finally, we audit the science of the office power play. When you enter a node's office, look at the height of their chair and the distance of their desk. A node who uses a high-back executive chair is attempting to artificially inflate their sovereign shell. The sovereign master is not affected by environmental static. You maintain your clinical stillness and focus on the limbic leaks in their face and hands. You recognize that the bigger the desk, the larger the neural wall the node has built to protect themselves. You bypass the desk by moving to a social coordinate or by leaning over the barricade to deliver your sovereign directive directly into their intimate space. The Audiobook Empire is built on this absolute refusal to be deterred by territorial architecture. You see the room as a map of frequencies, and you are the one who redraws the lines. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. We must now advance our clinical audit to the manual matrix and the dominance architecture of the human hand. In the global network, the hands are the most articulate transmitters of neural intent and hierarchy calibration. While the social mask focuses on the face, the hands are the primary tools used by the limbic system to enforce or yield status within the grid. The bungler views a handshake or gesture as a mere social convention. The sovereign master recognizes them as direct frequency overlays. We begin our investigation with the neural spear, the pointing finger. In the science of human relationships, the extended index finger is one of the most aggressive frequencies a node can broadcast. It is a physical incursion into the target's sovereign space, designed to box their signal and demand submission. When a node points at you, they are attempting to exert parental dominance. The sovereign master never utilizes the neural spear unless the objective is total hostile subjugation. Instead, you utilize the open palm directive, where the hand is flat and the fingers are joined. This signals total grid authority without triggering the target's aggression response. You lead the interaction by being the most stable node, not the most aggressive node in the room. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the hierarchy of the handshake with surgical precision. We have audited the palm orientation, but we must now analyze the grip pressure calibration. A node who utilizes the bone crusher handshake is broadcasting aggressive insecurity. They are attempting to overcompensate for a lack of internal authority by physically overwhelming your biological sensors. Conversely, the dead fish handshake, a limp, low-tension grip, is a red frequency signaling a lack of commitment, low energy, or social submission. The sovereign master maintains neural mirroring. You match the target's pressure exactly, creating a state of biological synchrony. This neutralizes their attempt to dominate or withdraw and establishes a peer-to-peer link. However, observe the double-handed glove. When a node uses their left hand to cover your right during a handshake, they are performing a status grab. They are trying to enclose your signal. You audit this as counterfeit intimacy. To neutralize it, you place your left hand on the target's right elbow, reclaiming the sovereign balance and signaling that you are the lead node who controls the boundaries of the interaction. Let us now analyze the protocol of the hand clasp. When a node stands with their hands clasped behind their back, they are broadcasting maximalist sovereign security. By exposing their ventral coordinate, including the throat and stomach, they are signaling to the grid that they fear no neural incursion. This is the posture of royalty, high-ranking military nodes, and sovereign masters. However, observe the altitude of the clasp. If the node is gripping their wrist behind their back, the neural tension is rising. If they are gripping their upper arm, the limbic friction is in the red zone. They are literally restraining their own anxiety or anger. You recognize this internal conflict, and you do not proceed with your broadcast until the target's hands drop. Conversely, hands clasped in front of the body, the fig leaf position, is a frequency of vulnerability. The node is protecting their biological center because they feel neurally exposed. You use this data to identify the most fragile nodes in the network and apply strategic reassurance to gain their compliance. We must also audit the science of the thumb's display. In the science of human relationships, the thumbs represent ego status and neural assertiveness. When a node hides their thumbs in their pockets or under their arms, they are signaling status deficit and social withdrawal. They are muffling their signal. The sovereign master always ensures their thumbs are visible, broadcasting a high-resolution status. Observe the thumbs-out pocket position, where the fingers are hidden but the thumbs remain exposed. This is a sovereign display of confidence and territorial ownership. When you see this signal in a competitor, you know they are neurally armed. You do not attack their position directly. You utilize tactical stillness to audit their movements until a neural fracture appears. The thumb is the status indicator of the manual grid, and you must monitor its biological altitude at all times. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the steeple. When a node joins their fingertips together in a tent-like formation, they are performing the high-intensity stealth power play. This is the steeple, the ultimate broadcast of intellectual dominance and sovereign confidence. It signals that the node is evaluating the grid from a position of absolute superiority. The sovereign master utilizes the steeple when delivering a final directive or when listening to a subordinate broadcast. It signals that you are the lead node and that your source code is impenetrable. However, beware of the down-turned steeple. This is used when the node is delivering a rejection. You recognize this negative frequency and you interrupt the pattern by handing the target an object or asking a hard target question to break their physical alignment. You do not allow the target to finalize a red decision while they are in the steeple position. The science of the hand-to-chin evaluation requires one final, deeper audit. When a node strokes their chin, they are in the neural processing phase. They are weighing your frequency against their internal OS. The sovereign master remains biologically silent during this phase. If you speak, you introduce static that can trigger a system rejection. You wait for the stroke to end. If the hand then moves to a mouth cover or an ear tug, the evaluation is negative. If the hand moves to the table or an open palm gesture, the evaluation is positive. You are the clinical observer who reads the pre-decision signal before the target even realizes they have made a choice. By the time they speak, the Audiobook Empire has already mapped the outcome. Finally, we audit the protocol of the objects as extensions. In the global network, the items you hold, your pen, your smartphone, your glasses, are neural antennas. When you point with a pen, you are extending your manual dominance into the target space. When you slowly clean your glasses during a negotiation, you are performing a tactical reset, buying time to audit the grid while appearing neurally occupied. The sovereign master never allows their objects to be used as pacifiers. You do not fidget, you do not click your pen, and you do not check your phone. You utilize your objects as surgical tools to mark territory and control the neural flow of the room. Every movement is calculated. Every gesture is a directive. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. We must now initiate a high-resolution audit of the deception matrix and the law of neural mirroring. In the global network, the ability to detect a counterfeit frequency is the difference between the sovereign master and the prey. While the social mask is designed to broadcast a script of honesty, the limbic system is biologically incapable of maintaining a total signal blockade. When a node lies, the brain experiences cognitive friction, creating a series of microleaks that the bungler ignores, but the sovereign master audits with clinical focus. We begin with the micro-expression, a transient limbic flare that lasts for less than 1/5 of a second. This is the raw source code of the target's internal state. If you see a flash of contempt or fear before the mask of a smile is applied, you have found the black swan. You do not trust the smile, you calibrate to the flash. In the 1% margin, truth is not heard. It is glimpsed in the fractures of the social performance. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the mirroring hack. In the science of human relationships, synchrony is the biological signal of tribal alignment. When two nodes are in resonance, they instinctively mirror each other's posture, gestures, and breathing patterns. This is neural echoing. The bungler mirrors accidentally, the sovereign master mirrors strategically. By subtly aligning your physical frequency with the target, matching their lean, their leg cross, or their hand position, you bypass their sovereign shielding and enter their trusted node. You are literally hacking their limbic system to believe that you are the same. However, you must utilize delayed synchrony. If you mirror too quickly, the target's predatory audit will detect the manipulation and trigger a system rejection. You wait for a 10-second delay before you echo their move. Once the neural bridge is established, you then lead. You shift your posture. If the target mirrors you back, you have achieved frequency capture. You are now the lead node, and the target is orbiting your frequency. We must also audit the science of the liar's ocular blockade. Contrary to the popular social static that liars avoid eye contact, many high-status liars utilize ocular overcorrection. They will stare at you with intense, unblinking focus to prove their sincerity. This is a counterfeit frequency. It feels clinical and unnatural because it lacks the biological rhythm of a genuine interaction. The sovereign master monitors the blink rate during these stares. If the target is staring but their blink rate is spiking or has completely frozen, they are under maximal cognitive load. They are performing a deception script. Furthermore, observe the ocular shield, the hand rubbing the eye or the lids closing for a prolonged duration during a hard target question. This is the brain's attempt to delete the reality of the lie. You see the blockade and you know the grid is fractured. You do not let them reset. You maintain the pressure until the mask shatters. Let us now analyze the protocol of the throat clear and the vocal leak. When the limbic system detects the stress of a signal conflict, the tissues in the throat constrict and the vocal cords tighten. This causes the vocal pitch to rise and forces the node to perform a neural reset by clearing their throat or swallowing hard. This is limbic sciatic. If a node's voice suddenly moves to a higher frequency when discussing a specific coordinate, you have found the point of friction. The sovereign master audits the tonality as much as the content. You recognize that dry mouth and frequent swallowing are the biological signatures of a system under duress. You do not ask for the truth. You watch the target struggle to swallow the lie. You are the clinical auditor of the vocal grid. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of hand-to-neck pacifiers in the context of deception. The neck is the most vulnerable sovereign coordinate in the human hardware. When a node feels neurally exposed, their hand will instinctively move to cover the suprasternal notch or rub the back of the neck. This is biological shielding. For a woman, this often manifests as touching a necklace or adjusting a scarf. For a man, it is the collar pull. These are venting gestures used to lower the internal temperature of a system that is overheating from the friction of a lie. You see the collar pull, and you know the target is suffocating under the weight of their own counterfeit broadcast. You stay cool. You stay still. You let the atmospheric pressure of your silence act as a catalyst for their collapse. The science of the foot exit signal requires one final, deeper audit in the deception matrix. While the face is performing the honesty script, the feet are often planning the flight response. If a node is sitting and their feet suddenly point toward the door, or if they begin to perform pedal tapping, they are broadcasting escape intent. Their neural bandwidth is no longer focused on the interaction, it is focused on the exit. The sovereign master recognizes this signal split. You do not continue the broadcast into a node that is already checked out of the grid. You either terminate the session to maintain your status, or you use a pattern interrupt to bring their feet back into alignment. You control the kinetic flow of the interaction by monitoring the most distant nodes of the body. Finally, we audit the protocol of the asymmetrical expression. Truth is a total system broadcast. It is symmetrical and involves the whole face. A lie is a partial overlay. If a target smiles, but the crow's feet around the eyes are absent, or if one side of the mouth rises higher than the other, you are witnessing signal asymmetry. The motor cortex is trying to force a smile that the limbic system refuses to support. This half mask is a definitive marker of neural dissonance. The sovereign master audits the face like a high-resolution map, looking for the fractures where the lie meets the truth. By the time the target has finished their sentence, you have already mapped their internal morality grid. You are not listening to what they say, you are watching what they cannot hide. The audiobook empire is built on this absolute ocular clarity. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the audiobook empire. We must now direct our clinical audit toward the socio-sexual matrix and the architecture of attraction. In the global network, the signals of courtship and power are the most ancient frequencies in the human hardware. The bungler believes that attraction is a matter of words and chemistry. The sovereign master knows it is a series of biological preening protocols designed to signal genetic fitness and territorial value. When two nodes engage in the grid of attraction, their limbic systems perform a neural handshake long before any social script is exchanged. We begin with the preening flare. When a node encounters a high-value target, they instinctively perform involuntary grooming, smoothing their hair, adjusting their clothing, or touching their neck. This is a system reset to ensure the social mask is optimized for the audit. You recognize this flare as a sign of ego submission and target interest. The node is literally calibrating their hardware to your frequency. You do not react. You maintain your sovereign stillness and allow their internal pressure to mount as they seek your signal approval. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the dilated pupil in the context of attraction. We have audited the pupils for deception, but in the socio-sexual matrix, they are the ultimate green frequency. When a node is genuinely attracted to your broadcast, their pupils will dilate involuntarily. This is a neural expansion that cannot be forged by the motor cortex. The sovereign master monitors the ocular altitude of the target. If the pupils remain pinpoints while the target smiles, the interaction is toxic or counterfeit. However, if the pupils expand, you have achieved limbic resonance. You utilize this data to escalate your sovereign influence. You do not ask if they are interested, you see the answer written in their biology. This is the 1% margin where you operate on raw data while others are lost in the static of social politeness. We must also audit the science of the foot point in social circles. As we have established, the feet are the most honest part of the grid. In a group setting, a node's feet will point toward the individual they find most neurally attractive or high status, regardless of who they are talking to. This is the limbic compass. If you are the lead node, you will notice the pedal alignment of the room shifting toward your coordinate. If you see a target's torso facing another, but their feet pointed at you, they have already limbically surrendered to your frequency. The sovereign master identifies these hidden alliances and uses them to map the social hierarchy with surgical precision. You do not compete for attention, you simply observe the feet to know who already owns the room. Let us now analyze the protocol of the exposed wrist and the neck tilt. In the science of human relationships, the exposure of vulnerable coordinates is a signal of biological trust and sovereign submission. For a female node, exposing the underside of the wrist or tilting the head to reveal the carotid artery are high-frequency green lights. They are signaling that their sovereign shielding is down. The sovereign master recognizes these neural invitations and responds with clinical calibration. You do not rush the interaction. You utilize tactical silence to let the target's attraction frequency deepen. Conversely, a male node will perform territorial expansion, occupying more space, flaring the elbows, and standing with a wide base anchor to signal alpha calibration. You audit these displays to determine if the node is a peer node or a subordinate node. You do not fight for territory, you occupy it through superior limbic stability. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of mirroring in attraction. When two nodes are in high-resolution resonance, they will instinctively synchronize their movements. They will sip their drinks at the same time, cross their legs in the same direction, and match their breathing. This is phase locking. The sovereign master utilizes strategic synchrony to accelerate the neural bridge. By subtly echoing the target's gestures, you make their limbic system believe that you are a safe node. Once the bridge is built, you then break the mirror. You shift your posture. If the target follows you, you have achieved frequency capture. You are now the lead node of the interaction, and their biology is orbiting your command. This is how the Audiobook Empire colonizes the neural space of others, through the surgical application of biological resonance. The science of the intimate gaze requires one final, deeper audit. In the socio-sexual matrix, the eyes perform a triangular sweep, moving from the eyes to the mouth and then down to the rest of the body. This is a high-intensity audit. If a node performs this sweep on you, they are evaluating your genetic value. The sovereign master does not flinch under this audit. You maintain your clinical stillness and return a social gaze to maintain your status. If you wish to escalate, you return the intimate gaze with surgical timing. You are the operator who knows that every look is a measurement of power. By controlling the ocular grid, you control the atmospheric pressure of the attraction. Finally, we audit the protocol of the self-touch. When a node is in the presence of someone they find high status or attractive, they will often touch their throat, face, or arms. This is a displacement gesture. Their limbic system is so overcharged with neural static that they must discharge it through touch. They are literally self-soothing the excitement. You see this neural leak, and you know you have occupied their internal architecture. You do not lower the pressure. You maintain your sovereign frequency and watch as the target's social mask continues to melt away, revealing the raw biological intent beneath. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. We must now initiate a clinical audit of territorial geometry and the architecture of environmental dominance. In the global network, the space you occupy and the objects you place within it are not neutral. They are neural barricades and territorial markers. The bungler walks into a room and hopes for a seat.
The sovereign master enters the grid and identifies the control coordinate before a single word is broadcast. We begin with the seating matrix at the rectangular table. In the science of human relations, the head of the table is the sovereign coordinate. It offers the maximum visual bandwidth, allowing the lead node to audit every other participant in the grid. However, observe the competitive defensive position, sitting directly opposite another node. This creates a direct signal clash. The table acts as a physical barrier that amplifies the friction between frequencies. If your mission is to reach a consensus, you avoid this position. You utilize the corner coordinate, sitting at a 90-degree angle to the target. This removes the neural wall of the table and allows for ventral fronting without aggressive incursion. You are the architect of the environment, and you choose the geometry that ensures your broadcast is received with minimum resistance. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the round table. In the historical grid, the round table was designed to signal neural equality. It eliminates the head and creates a shared frequency. However, the sovereign master knows that even in a circle, hierarchy exists based on proximity to the power node. The closer you are to the individual with the highest status, the more status by association you broadcast. Observe the social vacuum that often exists around a high-status node. Others are afraid to invade their sovereign shell. You do not hesitate. You occupy the adjacent coordinate with clinical stillness, signaling that your frequency is a peer to theirs. You do not ask for space, you assume it. By controlling the physical proximity, you control the perceived neural hierarchy of the group. We must also audit the science of office power plays and the architecture of the chair. In any high-stakes audit, the chair is a status amplifier. A node who sits in a chair with a higher back than yours is attempting to artificially inflate their sovereign shell. They are using their hardware to signal seniority. The sovereign master is not affected by environmental static. You recognize that the bigger the chair, the more the node is hiding behind their external OS. Observe the swivel and wheels protocol. A node on wheels has the ability to withdraw or recalibrate their distance instantly. This signals a need for neural mobility because they are insecure in their fixed position. You, as the lead node, remain grounded. You choose a fixed chair, or you keep your swivel chair perfectly still, signaling that your frequency is the stable anchor point of the interaction. You do not need to move because you already own the coordinate. Let us now analyze the protocol of territorial displacement. When you enter a node's office or private grid, look at how they have marked their territory. The placement of their coffee cup, their smartphone, and their notebook are neural markers designed to claim the table coordinate. The bungler respects these boundaries. The sovereign master intercepts the signal. You place your own notebook slightly into their territory, or you move a neutral object like a water pitcher to redefine the grid lines. This is a subtle incursion that tests the target's sovereign shielding. If the target moves their items back or performs a ventral blockade, they are defending the coordinate. If they allow your items to remain, they have limbically surrendered the space to your frequency. You use this data to determine how much pressure to apply in the negotiation. You are the navigator who maps the target's resistance through the physics of objects. Furthermore, let us perform a clinical audit of height and power. In the biological hardware of the human node, height equals status. This is a primal frequency that cannot be ignored. When you stand while the target is sitting, you are broadcasting a dominance overlay. You are looking down at their visual sensors, forcing them into a submissive ocular tilt. The sovereign master utilizes altitude manipulation with surgical precision. If a target is being resistant, you stand up to deliver your sovereign directive, physically looming over their sovereign shell. If you wish to build rapport, you lower your altitude to match theirs, signaling biological alignment. However,
Never allow a subordinate node to stand while you sit, as this allows them to intercept your signal from a position of perceived strength. You control the vertical hierarchy at all times. The science of the elevator audit requires our attention. The elevator is a high-density grid where the sovereign shell is compressed to its absolute limit. In this environment, human nodes perform ocular blocking, staring at the floor, the ceiling, or the floor indicator to avoid neural friction. The sovereign master remains biologically quiet but maintains a ventral fronting toward the door. You do not perform the submissive huddle. You occupy your coordinate with massive stillness, signaling that even in a compressed space, your frequency remains unyielding. You observe the limbic static of the other nodes, the fidgeting, the throat clearing, the checking of watches. You are the only node in the grid who is not overheating from the proximity. This establishes your lead node status in the silence. Finally, we audit the protocol of the group entry. When you approach a group of nodes already in interaction, observe their footpoint geometry. If they open the circle to include you, forming a V shape, you have been granted sovereign access. Their limbic systems have accepted your frequency. However, if they only turn their heads but keep their torsos and feet in a closed circle, you are an interlopers. You are being signal blocked. The sovereign master does not force entry into a closed circle. You utilize tactical presence, standing at the edge of their social zone with clinical stillness until the neural pressure of your presence forces them to open the coordinate. You do not beg for inclusion, you command it through the stability of your frequency. The Audiobook Empire is built on this absolute understanding of environmental flow. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. We must now initiate a clinical audit of props, disguises, and neural antennas. In the global network, the objects a node carries, cigarettes, glasses, makeup, and briefcases, are not merely functional items. They are limbic extensions used to buffer the atmospheric pressure of the grid. The bungler views these as accessories. The sovereign master recognizes them as diagnostic tools and frequency shields. We begin with the smoking protocol. Whether it is a traditional cigarette or a high-tech vape, the act of smoking is a neural pacifier used to discharge internal friction. The sovereign master audits the smoke direction to map the target's internal state. If a node blows smoke upward, they are broadcasting a high-resolution confidence and positive frequency. They feel they have the lead node status. Conversely, if they blow smoke downward or out of the corner of their mouth, they are experiencing negative internal calculation. They are withholding a black swan or feel biologically defeated. You monitor the timing of the exhalation during a negotiation. If the smoke goes down after you deliver a sovereign directive, the target's internal architecture is fracturing. You have successfully disrupted their grid. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the architecture of the ocular accessory, the glasses. In the science of human relations, glasses are used as tactical shields. Observe the peering over the lenses protocol. This is a dominance overlay that signals judgment and audit. It forces the target into a submissive state by creating a vertical hierarchy. The sovereign master recognizes this as an aggressive frequency. If a node peers over their glasses at you, you do not yield. You maintain your sovereign gaze and utilize clinical stillness until they adjust their lenses back to a neutral coordinate. Furthermore, the act of cleaning the glasses is a neural reset. The node is buying time to process your data without appearing vulnerable. They are deleting the frame of the interaction to recalibrate their internal OS. You do not interrupt the cleaning. You allow the silence to expand, increasing the pressure on their processor until they are forced to re-engage with the grid from a position of neural fatigue. We must also audit the science of the makeup and grooming mask. In the socio-sexual matrix, the application of makeup or the adjustment of hair is a preening signal designed to raise the node's social altitude. For a female node, the act of lipstick application in the presence of a target is a high-intensity attraction flare. It is a biological invitation for an audit. Similarly, for any node, mirror checking or clothing adjustment are biological resets. They are attempting to optimize their sovereign shell before the interaction. The sovereign master observes these preening cycles to determine the target's level of ego involvement. If they are heavily focused on their grooming, they are broadcasting status insecurity. You use this data to apply strategic validation or tactical indifference to control their internal frequency. You are the operator who sees through the disguise to the raw biological intent beneath. Let us now analyze the protocol of the briefcase and the handbag. These are ventral barricades.
In a high-stakes grid, a node will often place their briefcase or bag on their lap or between themselves and the lead node. This is biological shielding. They are protecting their ventral coordinate from your broadcast. The sovereign master recognizes this as a sign of neural friction and grid defensiveness. To dismantle this shield, you do not use force, you utilize environmental manipulation. You invite the target to look at a document on the table, forcing them to move their bag to engage with the data. Once the shield is removed, their neural guardrails are lowered, and you can deliver your sovereign directive directly into their exposed architecture. You are the architect of the interaction, and you do not allow any node to remain behind a physical blockade. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of the pen clicking and object fidgeting frequency. This is limbic static. When a node's internal frequency is overloading from the pressure of the audit, they discharge the excess energy through repetitive movements with objects. Clicking a pen, tapping a phone, or fiddling with a ring are all neural leaks. The sovereign master remains biologically quiet. You do not fidget. Your stillness acts as a frequency mirror that reflects the target's insecurity back at them. By maintaining massive stillness, you force the target to confront their own internal noise. You are the anchor node, and the target is a fractured signal trying to find a stable coordinate. You do not offer stability. You offer clinical audit until they surrender their position. The science of the drink shield requires our final attention in this phase. At a social coordinate, the way a node holds their glass is a diagnostic marker of their sovereign confidence. A node who holds their drink with both hands across their chest is performing high-altitude ventral guarding. They are closing the coordinate. Conversely, a node who holds their drink at waist level with one hand is broadcasting open receptivity. The sovereign master monitors the atmospheric pressure of the room by observing the altitude of the drinks. You move through the grid, identifying the nodes with the lowest shields and occupying their space. You do not waste your neural bandwidth on shielded nodes unless you are there to dismantle them. Finally, we audit the protocol of the phone wall. In the modern grid, the smartphone is the ultimate displacement tool. When a node feels neurally exposed or socially defeated, they retreat into their phone. They are exiting the coordinate while physically remaining in the space. The sovereign master does not allow a node to retreat into their digital shell. You utilize direct ocular interception or physical movement to force the node back into the primary frequency. You are the master of the live broadcast, and you ensure that every node in the audiobook empire remains phase-locked to your signal. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the audiobook empire. We must now advance our clinical audit to the negotiation grid and the architecture of high-stakes diplomacy. In the global network, the boardroom and the negotiation table are the ultimate testing grounds for neural dominance. The bungler walks into a negotiation hoping for a win-win scenario. The sovereign master enters the grid to establish frequency control and ensure that every node in the room is calibrated to their sovereign directive. We begin with the protocol of the arrival. In the science of human relationships, the first 60 seconds of an encounter determine the status altitude of the entire interaction. When you enter a new coordinate, you do not rush. You utilize massive stillness. You pause at the entrance, perform a sovereign scan of the room, and identify the lead node. By refusing to immediately acknowledge the social hierarchy, you signal that your frequency is independent and unyielding. You are the auditor, and the room is the subject.
Furthermore, let us deconstruct the architecture of the power seat in a professional audit. In any negotiation, the seating geometry is the hardware upon which the software of the deal is run. We have established the head of the table as the primary coordinate, but the sovereign master also monitors the shadow power of the side nodes. If you are not the official leader of the session, you occupy the flanking position, directly to the right of the lead node. This is the neural support coordinate, which allows you to audit the leader's limbic leaks while broadcasting your own sovereign signal to the rest of the grid. You become the power behind the throne. Conversely, if you are being audited by a hostile node, you do not allow them to seat you in a low-altitude chair. You adjust your position, move your chair slightly back to expand your sovereign shell, and ensure your ventral coordinate remains open and unyielding. You do not allow the environment to dictate your status. You redraw the grid lines through the physics of your presence. We must also audit the science of the negotiation cluster. A single gesture is a stat, but a cluster is a signal. When a target performs a neck scratch followed by a mouth cover and then ventral shielding, crossing their arms, the neural collapse is imminent. They are broadcasting a high-intensity system failure. The sovereign master recognizes this cluster flare as the moment to deliver the final directive. You do not wait for them to speak their doubt. You address the biological friction directly. You might say, "I see there are some internal calculations yet to be finalized." This tactical empathy bypasses their social mask and forces their limbic system to recognize your authority as the source of truth. You are not negotiating with their words, you are auditing their biology. Let us now analyze the protocol of the mirroring trap in high-stakes diplomacy. We have discussed mirroring as a tool for rapport, but the sovereign master also uses it as a diagnostic hack. To determine if you have achieved frequency capture, you perform a lead and follow audit. After mirroring the target for several minutes, you abruptly perform a disruptive gesture, perhaps a high-status steeple or a wide territorial expansion. If the target mirrors you back within 30 seconds, they have limbically surrendered. Their internal OS is now slave to your broadcast. You can now steer the interaction toward any coordinate you desire. However, if the target refuses to mirror and instead performs ocular blocking or ventral guarding, the neural bridge is fractured. You must return to biological quiet and recalibrate your signal before proceeding. You are the operator who never assumes agreement until the target's hardware confirms it. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of cultural signal clashes. In the global network, different geographic nodes have developed variations in their social software. A thumbs up in one coordinate is a green frequency, while in another it is a hostile incursion. The sovereign master is not distracted by these surface variants. You focus on the universal biological source code, the pupils, the sweat glands, the heart rate, and the ventral guarding. These signals are consistent across every human hardware on the planet. You do not get lost in the social static of cultural etiquette. You audit the limbic foundation. Whether in a skyscraper in Tokyo or a boardroom in London, the science of dominance remains the same. You are the transcultural auditor who sees the animal beneath the costume. The science of the final closing requires our final attention in this phase of the audit. When the deal is on the table, the atmospheric pressure in the grid reaches its maximum density. This is when neural friction is most visible. Observe the lip compression and the ocular shift. If the target is compressing their lips, they are locking the gate. They are suppressing a neural no. The sovereign master does not push at this moment. You utilize massive silence. You allow the target to struggle with their own biological friction until the cognitive load becomes unbearable. Most nodes will speak just to break the tension, and in that moment of verbal leakage, they will reveal their true price coordinate. You are the patient hunter who knows that silence is the most effective tool of extraction in the audiobook empire. Finally, we audit the protocol of the post-agreement signature. Once the yes is delivered, you must monitor the post-grid reset. If the target immediately stands up and performs a full-body shake or exhalation of relief, they have been operating under extreme neural stress. This alliance is fragile and may require frequency stabilization. However, if they remain in the coordinate and transition to social mirroring, the neural link is high resolution and stable. You gather your items with clinical deliberation, deliver a final sovereign handshake, and exit the coordinate with a vertical spine. You leave behind a neural footprint of absolute authority, ensuring that the deal you have secured is anchored in the target's biological hardware. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the audiobook empire. We must now elevate our clinical audit to the leadership frequency and the architecture of charismatic dominance. In the global network, leadership is not a title, it is a biological broadcast that subordinates the frequencies of others to your own. The bungler believes that charisma is an inherent trait. The sovereign master recognizes it as a series of calibrated signals designed to establish a vertical hierarchy in any social grid. We begin with the protocol of the slow movement. In the biological hardware of the human node, high-status individuals, the lead nodes, move with massive deliberation. They do not rush, they do not fidget, and they do not react to neural static. A node that moves quickly or performs jerky transitions is broadcasting status deficit and limbic anxiety. They are signaling that they are reacting to the environment rather than commanding it. The sovereign master utilizes clinical slowness. By taking 3 seconds to respond to a question and moving your head with sovereign stillness, you force the entire grid to wait for your broadcast. You become the anchor node that dictates the neural tempo of the room. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the architecture of the power stance in public audits. When you stand before a group, your pedal geometry determines your sovereign altitude. The wide base anchor, standing with feet shoulder-width apart, signals absolute territorial security. It is a broadcast of stability that the human limbic system instinctively respects. Conversely, standing with feet together or weight shifted to one side is a frequency of submission. It signals that you are ready to flight or yield the coordinate. The sovereign master maintains the anchor and utilizes ventral fronting toward the largest group of nodes. By exposing your ventral space with massive stillness, you signal that your frequency is unyielding and that you fear no neural incursion. You do not seek the crowd's approval. You command their attention through the physics of your posture. We must also audit the science of the ocular sweep in mass communication. A leader who focuses on only 1 or 2 nodes in a group creates a signal fracture, alienating the rest of the grid. The sovereign sweep utilizes the sovereign sweep, a slow, high-resolution scan of the entire audience. You make brief ocular contact with individual nodes, delivering a high-intensity signal of recognition before moving to the next. This creates a neural connection with every participant, making each node feel audited by your frequency.
However, you must avoid the submissive flicker, the rapid shifting of eyes that signals processor overload. Your sweep must be as deliberate as your movements. You are the lead signal that integrates every individual node into a single imperial network under your command.
Let us now analyze the protocol of the high-status steeple in a leadership context. We have discussed the steeple as an evaluation tool, but on a stage or in a high-stakes briefing, it is the final signature of authority. By joining your fingertips at chest level, you create a visual anchor that focuses the group's attention on your neural output. It signals that you are in a state of maximal cognitive control. The sovereign master utilizes the steeple when delivering the sovereign directive, the core mission of the broadcast. This gesture acts as a frequency muffle for all other static in the room. When you steeple, you are signaling that the audit is over and the era of execution has begun. It is the sovereign signal that demands total grid compliance. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of voice tonality and the neural low-pass filter. In the global network, the frequency of your voice is a direct broadcast of your limbic health. High-pitched, rapid speech is system noise that triggers neural friction in others. It signals subordinate anxiety. The sovereign master utilizes the vocal trop. You speak from the lower part of your throat, utilizing a low-frequency resonance that bypasses the target's neural guardrails and communicates directly with their survival OS. By slowing your speech rate and utilizing strategic pauses, you create a vacuum that pulls the audience into your frequency. You do not shout to be heard, you drop your volume to force the grid to lean in. You are the operator who controls the acoustic atmosphere of the audiobook empire. The science of the walking pattern also requires our attention in the audit of charisma. A leader's walk is their territorial claim. Observe the sovereign gait, a rhythmic, steady stride with the head held at a vertical 0 and the arms swinging naturally but with clinical stillness. A node that takes small, rapid steps or looks at the floor is yielding the grid. The sovereign master walks as if they already own every coordinate they pass through. When you enter a room, you do not look for a seat, you look for the lead coordinate. Your walk is the preliminary broadcast that prepares the grid for your arrival. By the time you reach the center of the room, the other nodes have already limbically calibrated to your status as the lead node. Finally, we audit the protocol of the charismatic withdrawal. High-status nodes do not remain in a coordinate longer than necessary. In the science of human relationships, scarcity equals value. The sovereign master delivers the sovereign directive, ensures the signal is locked, and then performs a surgical exit. You do not stay for social static or to muffle your frequency with triviality. You leave the grid while your signal is at its maximum amplitude. This leaves a neural afterglow in the nodes remaining as they continue to process your frequency in your absence. You are the ghost in the machine, the leader whose influence is felt long after the physical broadcast has ended. The audiobook empire is built on this absolute mastery of presence and absence. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the audiobook empire. We must now advance our clinical audit to the group dynamic matrix and the architecture of meeting room dominance. In the global network, the board meeting or group briefing is not a gathering of minds. It is a competitive broadcast where frequencies are measured and hierarchies are solidified. The bungler enters a meeting and seeks a chair based on convenience. The sovereign master enters the grid and identifies the power coordinates before the first signal is broadcast. We begin with the hierarchy of the rectangular table. In any high-stakes environment, the seat at the head of the table, the sovereign coordinate, offers the highest visual bandwidth, allowing the lead node to audit every other participant without turning their head. However, observe the power-adjacent position, sitting directly to the right or left of the lead node. This is the neural lieutenant coordinate. It signals that you are the primary support frequency for the sovereign signal. If you wish to disrupt a node's authority, you occupy the coordinate directly opposite them. This creates a direct signal clash, a physical blockade that forces a constant state of neural friction between your frequency and theirs. You are the architect of the seating geometry, and you choose the coordinate that best serves your audit. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the V-shape inclusion. In a standing group of 3 or more nodes, observe the pedal geometry. If 2 nodes are speaking and they stand directly facing each other, forming a closed signal, they are broadcasting that the interaction is private. If you attempt to enter this neural box, you trigger an immediate sovereign shielding response. However, if they stand at an angle to each other, forming a V-shape, they are broadcasting open receptivity. They are inviting other nodes to intercept their signal. The sovereign master recognizes these limbic openings and occupies the space with clinical stillness. Conversely, if you are the lead node in a conversation and you wish to exclude a subordinate broadcast, you simply close the V by shifting your feet to face the other node directly. You use the physics of your body to lock the grid and prevent any external incursion. You are the navigator of the social circle, and you control the access to the frequency. We must also audit the science of the meeting pacifier. In high-pressure group interactions, human nodes often perform self-soothing protocols to manage the atmospheric pressure. Observe the jewelry fiddle and the watch adjustment. When a node begins to slide their ring or repeatedly check their watch, they are broadcasting neural impatience or processor overload. They have reached their cognitive limit for the interaction. The sovereign master identifies these pacifying flares and recognizes that the target is vulnerable. You do not continue to deliver high-bandwidth data into a system that is already overheating. You utilize a sudden frequency shift, a pause, a change in vocal tone, or a direct, hard target question to reset the target's internal OS. By being the only node in the room who remains biologically quiet, you become the anchor frequency that everyone else calibrates to. Let us now analyze the protocol of the ocular audit in meetings. In the science of human relationships, the individual who receives the most eye contact is often perceived as the status leader. But the sovereign master knows that the individual who controls the ocular flow is the true lead node. When you speak to a group, you must avoid the submissive sweep, looking rapidly from face to face. Instead, you utilize the sovereign gaze. You lock onto a single mode for 3 to 5 seconds, delivering your frequency directly into their source code, and then move to the next. This creates a series of high-intensity neural links that force every node in the room to remain phase-locked to your broadcast. If a subordinate node attempts to interrupt your signal, you do not look at them. You continue your sweep, maintaining your sovereign direction, and only acknowledge their presence once you have finished your broadcast. You are the director of the visual environment. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of the first-to-speak and last-to-speak dynamics. In the global network, the node that initiates the broadcast often attempts to set the neural tempo, but the node that speaks last often controls the final consensus. The sovereign master utilizes strategic silence. You allow the other nodes to discharge their neural static and reveal their black swans during the early stages of the meeting. You audit their limbic leaks, the ventral guarding, the eye blocking, and the asymmetrical smiles. By the time you deliver your sovereign directive at the end of the session, you have already mapped the internal architecture of the room. Your signal is more powerful because it is based on the data the others have unwittingly revealed. You are the patient auditor who wins the interaction before you even open your mouth. The science of the hand-to-face evaluation in a group setting also requires our attention. Observe the chin stroke of the decision-maker. This is the neural gateway to a green or red frequency. If you see multiple nodes performing chin stroking simultaneously, the grid is in a state of collective calculation. This is the moment of maximum neural plasticity. The sovereign master remains clinically still during this phase. If you speak too early, you introduce static into their calculation. You wait for the hands to drop. If the decision maker drops their hand and leans forward with open palms, the alliance is secured. If they lean back and perform ventral shielding, the signal is rejected. You are the observer who reads the pre-decision flare to know exactly when to push for the close and when to withdraw to recalibrate. Finally, we audit the protocol of the sovereign meeting exit. The way you conclude a group interaction is the final signature of your status. The bungler lingers, engaging in social static and small talk damping, which lowers their frequency. The sovereign master performs a surgical withdrawal. You gather your items with massive deliberation, deliver a single power sweep of the room, and exit the coordinate with a vertical spine. You do not look back for validation. This leaves a neural vacuum that forces the remaining nodes to continue processing your signal in your absence. You have not just left the room, you have colonized the memory of every node in the grid. The Audiobook Empire is built on this absolute mastery of presence and departure. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. We must now elevate our clinical audit to the high-risk grid and the architecture of imminent aggression. In the global network, the ability to detect a hostile frequency before it manifests as physical incursion is the ultimate 1% margin. The bungler misses the biological pre-roll and is blindsided by the conflict. The sovereign master monitors the limbic flare and neutralizes the threat while it is still in the neural processing phase. We begin with the science of the dilation-constriction cycle in a hostile environment. When a node is preparing for an aggressive incursion, their pupils will often constrict into pinpoints as the brain focuses with surgical intensity on the target. However, at the moment of the limbic strike, the pupils may dilate as the system is flooded with adrenaline. The sovereign master audits this ocular flicker as a sign of maximum threat level. You do not wait for the verbal insult, you recognize the biological launch sequence. You maintain your sovereign stillness and occupy a stable coordinate, signaling that your frequency is unyielding. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the hands-on hips position, the akimbo. In the science of human relationships, this is the maximalist territorial claim. By placing the hands on the hips and flaring the elbows, the node is attempting to artificially inflate their sovereign shell. They are making themselves physically larger to intimidate the surrounding grid. The sovereign master recognizes the akimbo as a pre-aggression signal. If the thumbs are pointed forward, it is often a sign of defensive readiness. But if the thumbs are pointed backward, the neural focus is on dominance and attack. You do not mirror this posture, as it creates a direct signal clash. Instead, you utilize tactical stillness and maintain an open palm directive. By refusing to enter their aggression loop, you force the target to maintain a high-energy broadcast that their system cannot sustain. You win by being the more stable node in the interaction. We must also audit the science of the chest expansion and ventral puffing. When a node feels their hierarchy is being challenged, they will instinctively inhale deeply to expand their ventral coordinate. This is a primal broadcast designed to signal physical fitness and combat readiness. It is often accompanied by the chin-up tilt, which exposes the throat, a signal of sovereign arrogance. They are saying, "I do not fear your frequency." The sovereign master recognizes this biological posturing for what it is, limbic static. You do not react to the puffing. You maintain a vertical zero head position and deliver your sovereign directive in a low-frequency tone. By speaking beneath their aggression frequency, you bypass their social mask and communicate directly with their survival OS. You are the auditor who remains clinical while the target is overheating. Let us now analyze the protocol of the micro-shutter and the pallor shift. In high-stakes confrontations, observe the target's skin. When the limbic system triggers the flight or fight response, blood is redirected from the surface of the skin to the large muscles. This causes a sudden pallor. The target turns white. This is a high-resolution threat signal. It indicates that the target's neural architecture is fully committed to a physical outcome. Conversely, a red flush indicates emotional overload or anger, which is often less controlled and more reactive. The sovereign master recognizes the white signal as the most dangerous frequency in the grid. In this state, the target is no longer auditing the social script. They are operating on raw biological instinct. You utilize tactical withdrawal or frequency de-escalation to prevent a grid failure. You are the navigator who knows when to press and when to navigate around a limbic storm. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of the ready position and weight distribution. A node that is truly phase-locked on an aggressive mission will shift their weight onto the balls of their feet.
They are primed for movement. Observe the shoulder drop. When one shoulder drops slightly lower than the other, the node is setting their base for a physical strike. This asymmetrical alignment is a definitive marker of predatory intent. The sovereign master identifies this mechanical shift and adjusts their own pedal geometry to maintain massive stability. You do not allow the target to anchor their position. You move to a new coordinate, forcing them to recalibrate their balance and disrupting their neural launch. You control the physics of the encounter to ensure you are never the target of a biological strike. The science of the lip thinning also requires our attention in the high-risk grid. When a node is suppressing an aggressive impulse or a hostile directive, their lips will thin until they are almost invisible. They are locking the gate on their internal state. This is a broadcast of maximum internal friction. If you see the lips disappear, the grid is in a state of pre-collapse. Any further pressure will trigger a limbic flare. The sovereign master recognizes this signal muffle and utilizes strategic silence. You allow the target's own internal pressure to dissipate before delivering the final sovereign audit. You are the clinical operator who knows that the most powerful signal is the one that is never sent in anger. Finally, we audit the protocol of the ocular fixation in conflict. A node that is about to initiate a signal clash will often perform a hard ocular lock. They stop blinking and focus their sensors on your ventral coordinate or your neural center. This is the hunter's gaze. The sovereign master does not engage in an ocular war. You utilize the social-to-business gaze shift and then briefly look away to a neutral coordinate, signaling that the target is not a threat frequency. By refusing to acknowledge their predatory signal, you disrupt their hierarchy loop and re-establish yourself as the lead node.
The Audiobook Empire is built on this absolute refusal to be intimidated by biological static. You are the observer who stays cool in the center of the storm. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. We must now initiate a surgical audit of high-level deception and the asymmetry of the social mask. In the global network, truth is symmetrical, while deception is a fractured broadcast. When a node attempts to project a counterfeit frequency, their biological hardware often fails to synchronize with their conscious script. Observe the target's face for hemifacial asymmetry. When an emotion is forced, be it a smile of agreement or a look of concern, it often appears more intense on one side of the face than the other. This is because the social mask is driven by the motor cortex, which lacks the neural depth of the limbic system. You recognize this fractured signal as a definitive marker of insincerity. The 1% margin is found in the ability to detect these microscopic signal clashes. You do not react to the words, you audit the asymmetry.
If the mouth says, "I agree," but the left side of the face remains rigid, you are dealing with a shadow agreement. You have identified a black swan in the interaction. You stay still, you maintain the sovereign gaze, and you allow the silence to expand until the target's internal friction forces them to reveal the truth. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the ocular blockade in high-stakes interrogation. When a node is confronted with a truth they cannot bypass, they will perform visual guarding. This goes beyond a simple blink. It is a prolonged closure of the eyes, often accompanied by a hand moving to rub the lids. The brain is literally attempting to delete the frame of the interaction. It is a biological system reset. The sovereign master recognizes this as a sign of maximum cognitive load. The target has run out of neural bandwidth to maintain the lie. You do not interrupt the reset. You wait for the eyes to reopen, and the moment they do, you deliver the most critical sovereign directive of the session. You catch them in the neural gap between the blockade and the re-establishment of the mask. This is how you navigate the grid with surgical timing, exploiting the biological limitations of the human node to achieve absolute dominance. We must also audit the science of the micro-shrug during verbal affirmations. When a node says yes but performs a subtle one-sided shoulder shrug, their limbic system is broadcasting a neural no. This neural muffle is one of the most reliable indicators of lack of commitment. They are physically shrinking away from their own words. The bungler accepts the verbal yes and moves forward, only to be blindsided later by a grid failure. The sovereign master audits the shoulders as the source of truth. If the neural coherence is missing, the deal is not closed. You stop the broadcast and address the limbic leak directly. By demanding total physical alignment, you ensure that every alliance in your network is built on a high-resolution foundation. You are the clinical auditor who refuses to build on a fractured grid. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the ventral shield in a standing environment. When a node feels audited or threatened, they will often shift their body so that an arm or an object, like a smartphone or a folder, is positioned directly over their suprasternal notch or their solar plexus. This is ventral guarding. They are protecting their most vulnerable biological coordinates. The sovereign master recognizes this shielding protocol as a broadcast of internal defeat. The target has already surrendered the sovereign space. You do not move to lower their shield through force. Instead, you utilize tactical empathy. You lower your own vocal frequency and open your ventral coordinate, signaling that you are the lead node and the environment is safe for their submission. Once the shield drops, you have total access to their neural architecture. You are the master of the biological bridge, knowing exactly when to apply pressure and when to provide a neural path for compliance. The science of the pupil of deception also requires a final, deep investigation. While we have discussed dilation, we must now monitor the pupillary bounce. When a node is calculating a lie, the pupils will often perform a rapid constrict-dilate cycle as the brain switches between the internal calculation and the external performance. This is the neural pulse of the liar. You observe this flicker, and you know the target is processing static. They are not in a state of neural flow. The sovereign master remains biologically quiet, minimizing their own signals to better detect the pupillary fluctuations of the target. You are the neural interceptor who catches the deception before it is even translated into words. This is the 1% margin that makes you untouchable in the grid. Finally, we audit the protocol of the hand-to-neck pacifier in response to hard target questions. When you deliver a sovereign audit and the target's hand moves to cover their throat or rub the back of their neck, they are broadcasting a high-intensity fear frequency. The neck is the neural gateway, and the body's instinct is to protect it when the survival OS is triggered.
You see this pacifying flare, and you know you have hit the nerve center of the interaction. You do not let up. You maintain your clinical stillness and your sovereign gaze. You allow the target's own biological reactions to act as a neural hammer, breaking through the final layers of their social mask. The audiobook empire is built on this relentless pursuit of raw data. You are the observer who sees the truth because you have the courage to audit the biology. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control.
Welcome to the inner sanctum of the audiobook empire. We must now advance our clinical audit to the science of limbic attraction and the architecture of biological resonance. In the global network, attraction is not a social choice, it is a neural alignment. The bungler believes in the law of attraction as a mystical force, but the sovereign master recognizes it as the law of biology. When two nodes are in a state of high-resolution interest, their bodies perform automatic synchrony. Observe the mirroring of the pupil. When a target is attracted to your broadcast or your presence, their pupils will dilate involuntarily to capture more of your signal. This is a green frequency that cannot be forged. Furthermore, look for the ventral openness in a social grid. A node that is interested in your coordinate will turn their heart, stomach, and toes toward you, even if they are speaking to another node. They are signaling priority. The sovereign master audits these resonance markers to identify the most receptive nodes in the room. You do not waste your neural energy on closed systems. You occupy the nodes that are already broadcasting a frequency of receptivity. Let us now deconstruct the protocol of the preening reflex. In the science of human relationships, when a node enters the orbital shell of someone they find high status or attractive, they perform involuntary grooming, smoothing their hair, adjusting their clothing, or touching their neck. This is a system reset to ensure the social mask is optimized for the audit. You recognize this flare as a sign of ego submission and target interest. The node is literally calibrating their hardware to your frequency. You do not react. You maintain your sovereign stillness and allow their internal pressure to mount as they seek your signal approval. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the dilated pupil in the context of attraction. We have audited the pupils for deception, but in the socio-sexual matrix, they are the ultimate green frequency. When a node is genuinely attracted to your broadcast, their pupils will dilate involuntarily. This is a neural expansion that cannot be forged by the motor cortex. The sovereign master monitors the ocular altitude of the target. If the pupils remain pinpoints while the target smiles, the interaction is toxic or counterfeit. However, if the pupils expand, you have achieved limbic resonance. You utilize this data to escalate your sovereign influence. You do not ask if they are interested, you see the answer written in their biology. This is the 1% margin where you operate on raw data while others are lost in the static of social politeness. We must also audit the science of the foot point in social circles. As we have established, the feet are the most honest part of the grid. In a group setting, a node's feet will point toward the individual they find most neurally attractive or high status, regardless of who they are talking to. This is the limbic compass. If you are the lead node, you will notice the pedal alignment of the room shifting toward your coordinate. If you see a target's torso facing another, but their feet pointed at you, they have already limbically surrendered to your frequency. The sovereign master identifies these hidden alliances and uses them to map the social hierarchy with surgical precision. You do not compete for attention, you simply observe the feet to know who already owns the room. Let us now analyze the protocol of the exposed wrist and the neck tilt. In the science of human relationships, the exposure of vulnerable coordinates is a signal of biological trust and sovereign submission.
For a female node, exposing the underside of the wrist or tilting the head to reveal the carotid artery are high-frequency green lights. They are signaling that their sovereign shielding is down. The sovereign master recognizes these neural invitations and responds with clinical calibration. You do not rush the interaction. You utilize tactical silence to let the target's attraction frequency deepen. Conversely, a male node will perform territorial expansion, occupying more space, flaring the elbows, and standing with a wide base anchor to signal alpha calibration. You audit these displays to determine if the node is a peer node or a subordinate. You do not fight for territory. You occupy it through superior limbic stability. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical audit of mirroring in attraction. When two nodes are in high-resolution resonance, they will instinctively synchronize their movements. They will sip their drinks at the same time, cross their legs in the same direction, and match their breathing. This is phase locking. The sovereign master utilizes strategic synchrony to accelerate the neural bridge. By subtly echoing the target's gestures, you make their limbic system believe that you are a safe node. Once the bridge is built, you then break the mirror. You shift your posture. If the target follows you, you have achieved frequency capture. You are now the lead node of the interaction, and their biology is orbiting your command. This is how the Audiobook Empire colonizes the neural space of others through the surgical application of biological resonance. The science of the intimate gaze requires one final, deeper audit. In the socio-sexual matrix, the eyes perform a triangular sweep, moving from the eyes to the mouth and then down to the rest of the body. This is a high-intensity audit. If a node performs this sweep on you, they are evaluating your genetic value. The sovereign master does not flinch under this audit. You maintain your clinical stillness and return a social gaze to maintain your status. If you wish to escalate, you return the intimate gaze with surgical timing. You are the operator who knows that every look is a measurement of power. By controlling the ocular grid, you control the atmospheric pressure of the attraction. Finally, we audit the protocol of the self-touch. When a node is in the presence of someone they find high status or attractive, they will often touch their own throat, face, or arms. This is a displacement gesture. Their limbic system is so overcharged with neural static that they must discharge it through touch. They are literally self-soothing the excitement. You see this neural leak, and you know you have occupied their internal architecture. You do not lower the pressure. You maintain your sovereign frequency and watch as the target's social mask continues to melt away, revealing the raw, biological intent beneath. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now master the final protocol, the sovereignty of the closing. In the global network, the closing of a deal, a negotiation, or a relationship is where the highest frequency of neural friction occurs. The bungler feels the pressure of the finish line and begins to broadcast static. They talk too much. They fidget with their hands, and they perform pacifying gestures like neck rubbing or collar venting. They are desperate to escape the tension. The sovereign master, however, utilizes clinical stillness. When the final terms are delivered, you do not seek validation. You deliver the frequency, and then you deactivate the broadcast. You remain perfectly motionless, maintaining the sovereign gaze without blinking. This creates a neural vacuum in the grid. The human brain is biologically programmed to fill silence, and by refusing to do so, you force the target to negotiate against themselves. They will offer concessions, reveal black swans, and yield coordinates just to lower the atmospheric pressure you have created. You are the architect of the silence, and the silence is your most lethal weapon. Furthermore, Let us deconstruct the science of the post-agreement audit. The interaction does not end when the yes is spoken. Observe the target the moment they believe the broadcast is over. This is when the limbic guard drops. Look for the exhalation of relief, a long, deep breath that signals they have been suppressing neural stress. If the target immediately performs ventral shielding or turns their feet toward the exit after the agreement, the neural link was forced, not forged. They are experiencing buyer's remorse at a biological level. The sovereign master audits this post-grib leak to determine the stability of the alliance. If you detect high-frequency regret, you do not leave the coordinate. You re-engage the resonance protocol to stabilize their frequency before exiting. You ensure the architecture of the deal is biologically sound before you move to the next node. We must also audit the protocol of the physical departure. The way you exit a coordinate is the final signature of your frequency. The bungler leaves hurriedly, signaling that they are relieved the audit is over. This lowers their status in the aftermath. The sovereign master performs a sovereign exit. You gather your items with clinical deliberation, maintain a vertical spine, and deliver a final power handshake that is perfectly calibrated. You do not look back. By exiting with massive stillness, you leave behind a neural footprint of absolute authority. The nodes remaining in the room will continue to calibrate to your frequency long after you have left the grid. You have not just occupied the space, you have colonized the atmosphere. This is how the Audiobook Empire maintains its dominance, through the lasting impact of the sovereign signal. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the mirror image recall. When you have exited the interaction, you must perform a neural review of the mirroring that occurred. If the target mirrored your high-status gestures, the steeple, the lean back, the open palm, the neural capture was successful. They have accepted your source code. If they remained in a state of asynchronous static, you have only achieved surface compliance. The sovereign master uses this audit to categorize every node in their network. You know who is a satellite node orbiting your frequency, and who remains an independent signal. By mapping these loyalties through biological data, you build an empire that is immune to social betrayal. The science of the micro-expression of regret also requires our final, deep investigation. Look for the lip compression and the downward ocular shift in the seconds following a commitment. This is the limbic flash of a node that feels they have yielded too much. You recognize this signal flare and you use it to your advantage. You do not offer to change the terms, you offer strategic validation. You feed their ego to mask their biological loss. By making the target feel like the lead node in their own narrative, you secure their compliance while maintaining total control of the source code of the deal. You are the neural engineer who builds the bridge and the gate. Finally, we audit the protocol of the perpetual sovereign. Body language is not a tool you pick up and put down, it is a permanent system upgrade. To maintain your status in the 1% margin, you must live in a state of constant calibration. Whether you are at a coffee shop, in a boardroom, or in a private residence, your sovereign shell must remain intact. You do not allow neural slump or biological static to muffle your broadcast. You are the clinical observer who sees the truth because you have the courage to audit the biology of every node you encounter. The Audiobook Empire is built on this relentless pursuit of raw data. You are the master of the grid. The signal is yours to command. The truth is yours to own. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. As we reach the zenith of this clinical audit of the human broadcast system, you must accept your final transformation into a sovereign architect of the grid.
You have successfully deconstructed the biological source code of the species, moving from the surface static of the social mask to the raw limbic reality of the human animal. You now recognize that the world is not a place of random social encounters, but a high-density network of frequencies, signals, and territorial incursions. The bungler remains trapped in the illusion of words, forever reacting to the counterfeit broadcasts of others. But you, as a sovereign of the audiobook empire, operate in the 1% margin of absolute clarity. You do not listen to what people say. You audit what they cannot help but reveal through the physics of their existence. You have mastered the architecture of stillness, the geometry of space, and the linguistics of biological honesty. Every room you enter is now a laboratory under your command, and every node you encounter is an open book waiting for your clinical investigation. We must now finalize the protocol of the perpetual audit. This is the permanent system upgrade that ensures your dominance is never offline. In the global network, the lead node is the one who maintains the most stable frequency, regardless of the environmental pressure. You utilize massive stillness not just as a tactic, but as your baseline state of being. When others fidget, lean, and perform pacifying gestures, you remain an unyielding anchor of biological stability. This neural gravity forces every other node in the grid to calibrate their tempo to yours. You are the one who determines when a conversation begins, when the atmospheric pressure rises, and when the interaction is terminated. You have moved beyond the need for validation because you are the source of truth in your own grid. Your presence is a sovereign directive that demands compliance through the silent authority of your alignment. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the final synthesis of the Ocular Grid. Your eyes are the primary sensors of the audiobook empire. You have moved beyond simple eye contact to the surgical audit of the ocular pulse. You monitor the pupillary bounce, the blink rate frequency, and the micro shutter of the lids with the detachment of a clinical operator. You see the neural gap between a node's intention and their performance. When you deliver a high-stakes query, you watch the target's eyes rub, block, and shift, and you know exactly where their internal architecture is fracturing. You do not offer them a bridge of words to escape their own friction. You allow the silence to act as a neural hammer, breaking through the final layers of their social mask until the raw truth is exposed. You are the navigator who sees through the fog of deception to the bedrock of biological fact. We must also audit the science of the environmental colonization. The space around you is no longer neutral territory. It is an extension of your sovereign shell. You occupy the grid with territorial confidence, marking your coordinates through the deliberate placement of your body and your objects. You understand the physics of proximity and the limbic buffer zones better than anyone in the network. You know how to ventrally front a node to demand honesty, and how to utilize corner geometry to build stealth rapport. You do not wait for permission to lead. You occupy the power coordinate because you are the only node capable of managing the frequency. The audiobook empire is not just a collection of data. It is a territorial blueprint for total dominance in every square meter you inhabit. Let us analyze the protocol of the silent leader. The most powerful signal in the grid is the one that is never spoken. Your nonverbal signature is now so refined that you can steer an entire room of nodes without uttering a single sentence. Through the sovereign sweep of your gaze, the wide base anchor of your posture, and the clinical slowness of your movements, you project an authority that bypasses the target's conscious mind and speaks directly to their survival OS. They follow you because their biology tells you you are the lead node. They yield the space because your frequency is more stable than theirs.
You are the neural architect who builds the hierarchy through the sheer mass of your biological presence. This is the ultimate goal of our mission: to move through the world as a ghost in the machine, controlling the outcomes while remaining biologically quiet. As we close this definitive audit, remember that the science of body language is the foundational software of human power. You have the tools to intercept any lie, dismantle any shield, and occupy any coordinate in the global network. You are the auditor, the navigator, and the sovereign. The grid is no longer a mystery to you. It is a map that you have already conquered. Carry this high-resolution clarity with you into every future interaction. Do not allow the static of the world to muffle your signal. Stay calibrated to the 1% margin. The signals are yours to command. The truth is yours to own. The Audiobook Empire is built on your unyielding resolve to see what is hidden and to lead where others follow. The mission is now fully executed. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control.